Hello and welcome back to Tell Me Your Ghost Story. I'm your host, Cassie Askin, and today we hear Maria's story and Michelle's story. These two women have stories that are very similar in some ways, but take wildly different turns. First, we have Maria's story. In 2007, she and her four siblings were driving home to Georgia after attending their uncle's funeral in Florida. They stopped at a gas station just past Tifton, Georgia to use the restroom, but something felt off. Their unease quickly turned into fear, and they rushed back to the car. What happens next is truly unexplainable. So without any further ado, let's hear Maria's story. Hey Maria, tell me your ghost story.
Hi, so I'm Maria, and starting from a very young age, my mom was a psychic medium. So the paranormal was always something that was kind of ingrained in us from small children. And I remember she always called them wayward spirits or waywards. And she's like, because of the type of energy that I have, these spirits are attracted to me. And those kind of come in, say hi, then they leave. So we were used to seeing, something out of the corner of our eyes or something like that, So, but when I had my experience, it all happened. It was August 12th, 2007. And it was me. I'm not going to say their names, but my brother R, my brother T, my sister K, and my sister-in-law L. Our favorite uncle, who we were extremely close to, he was more like a grandfather to us. Our grandfathers passed away before I was 2 years old, so we never had grandfathers growing up. And he was my grandmother's brother, and he was always like a grandfather to us. We were very, very close to him. So we had gone down there on a Friday, got down there pretty late Friday night. Saturday was the wake, and we all kind of hung out at my aunt's house and things like that. And one thing about my uncle was he was an amazing gardener. He had this amazing, amazing backyard, and he grew sugarcane and guava and mangoes and just all kinds of really cool stuff. I have amazing memories of him always giving us these 6-inch pieces of sugarcane. And you'd see us kids running around the backyard sucking on these sugarcane sticks. And I remember thinking, this is the last time I'm going to be in this backyard. So his son was like, well, hey, I'm going to give you this massive 6-foot piece of sugarcane to take home with you. So I thought, oh, that's cool. So we kind of had to feed it through the back of my SUV. I had a 2004 Buick Rendezvous, and it wasn't a very big SUV. So we fed this thing down the center of the car to fit it in the car. And that was on Saturday. And Sunday, we had the funeral. We actually buried him on Sunday. And we all went back to my aunt's house for, the typical brunch type situation. There was so many family members I hadn't seen in years that were there. And we were just honestly just having such a good time being around our family. We didn't get together like that very often. And so it was just really, really nice to be around family. And so the trip was going to take us about 10 hours to get home. So the original plan is we were going to leave at 2:00 in the afternoon. It wouldn't be too bad. We'd still make it home in a decent hour because we all had to be at work on Monday. We all had jobs. I was 26 when this happened. We decided we were going to stay a little bit longer. So we stayed till about 5, 6 o'clock that evening. And we're like, okay, we got to get home. We're going to go into work on zero sleep tomorrow. So we ended up staying till 5 or 6 in the afternoon, and we finally got on the road. And we were driving, and there was laughing, and there was crying, sharing memories, and just having a really good time together, because me and my siblings didn't get together very often. We all had our own lives. I had 3 kids at the time, and, my brother R was married and living his life, so we didn't get together very often, where it was just the siblings. So we got through Florida, we got over the border, we got through Valdosta, and I specifically remember seeing the Flying J sign and thought, okay, I'm going to have to take a gas. I'm good. We'll keep going as far as we can because we had a long drive ahead of us. So we got right past Tifton and probably a couple exits past Tifton, maybe 10, 15 minutes or so. I had the urge, I got to go to the bathroom right now. It was one of those painful, I got to go this instant. So I just got off the very first exit not paying attention, really. Just, I gotta find a bathroom. I get to the exit, and of course, I look both ways. There was just a stop sign there. And I looked to my left, and there's just a bridge, nothing but trees and a bridge. Okay. I looked to my right, nothing but trees. And I thought, well, I'll just go ahead and go right. There's gotta be something. So we're driving down the road, and it's like 15 minutes. I'm like, oh my God, like there's gotta be a bathroom. But there's no place to turn around. There's no restaurants, no hotels, no other gas stations. It was just thick trees on both sides of this 2-lane road. And no cross streets, no streets to turn down, anything like that. I was thinking at this point, well, maybe I should just do a U-turn in the middle of the road or something like that. We've got to find something. And then all of a sudden, I see these lights of a gas station. I'm like, oh, thank God. The gas station was on my left, so I pull into the gas station in front of these 2 pumps. I jumped out the car, ran through the pumps, ran in the gas station, kind of just a real quick, like, look around, and there was a sign that said restroom. So I just bolted in the restroom, like, did my business or whatever, and the toilets worked, the toilets flushed. I washed my hands in the sink. I dried my hands, but there was nothing like odd about the bathroom. It was like just a dingy old gas station bathroom. It wasn't filthy or dirty or anything like that, but it was kind of a grungy bathroom. I opened the door of the bathroom, and there is my siblings, and they're all looking at each other, and I'm like, okay. And my sister Kay rushes past me and runs into the bathroom. I look at my brother T, and he kind of looks at me, and he gives me that look of like, when somebody's trying to tell you to look at something, but they're being quiet. So they're kind of like doing like the head nod and like the eye thing, like look over there. And so I looked where he was pointing, or not pointing, but like trying to get my attention to look toward. And that's why I noticed the gentleman behind the counter. And it was this older gentleman. He was wearing a white t-shirt that looked kind of stained up, had like pit stains on it, a pair of like just grungy overalls, and his face was like almost skeletal. Like he was so incredibly thin. Like his cheeks were just sunk in, and he had like a scraggly beard and like thinning white hair. And then his eyes were so incredibly dark. When I tell you they were dark, I mean, it was just like pitch black eyes. And I was just like, okay, like, and having this feeling of like, okay, something's wrong. What really caught me off guard too, besides his eyes being so incredibly dark, is he didn't move. Like there was no facial expression, no movement. Like he didn't like follow us with his eyes. Like there was just no movement. It's like feeling really, really uncomfortable at this point. I kind of go around to like one of the aisles. There's only like 3 little aisles. As I went around the one aisle, I remember kind of like they were probably I could just see over the shelves of like the candy and snacks and stuff. And like my brother T was like intently staring at this guy, like intently staring at him. And my brother R and my sister-in-law L, they were just kind of like looking at each other, looking at me and like, but not saying anything. And so I remember coming around and kind of like, okay, like looking at the snacks, but then that's when I noticed that they were kind of off. Like the labels looked old, and there was just dust on everything. That's when I really started kind of like trying to pay attention to my surroundings at this point. Because I really hadn't been paying close attention. And I looked over, and the drink cooler, there's 3 drink coolers, like old fashioned drink coolers. And the glass was like just dingy and grungy, and the lights were kind of like would intermittently like flicker off and on. And I remember it was kind of like oddly dim in there, and there was just like a one large fluorescent light, and every once in a while it would kind of like do that like zzzz thing that fluorescent lights do. The feeling kept getting worse and worse, like we've got to get out of here, we do not belong here, I've got to get me and my siblings out of this situation, like there's something wrong, like I feel like this is going to end badly. So as I'm coming around back toward my siblings, my sister opens the door. I immediately just grab her hand, and we all bolt out of the gas station. We didn't get gas. We didn't buy snacks. We all jumped back in the car, and I like fly out of there. So We made a left into the gas station. So to get out of the gas station, we had to make a right to go back to the highway, logically speaking. So I get out of there, make a right, and we're going down this road. Now, it took us about 15, 20 minutes to get to the gas station to begin with. So it should have taken us 15, 20 minutes to get back to a highway, logically speaking. No highway. And I'm like, what the hell? All of a sudden, I see the lights for the gas station up ahead on my left. And I remember like rolling my window down and like slowing down, like looking out the window and like, what the hell? Like thinking I must have gone on a fork. I must have made a turn, something. Like there had to be something to loop us back here. I never did. Like it was a perfectly straight road. No hills, nothing, a perfectly straight road. And that's when I really noticed that the guy was no longer facing the inside of the gas station. He was now by the window, looking out the window, staring at us. And of course, by this time now, my brothers and sisters, they're all freaking out, screaming, yelling. I'm the big sister. So I'm trying to be logical, thinking, okay, there's got to be an explanation for this. But I sure as hell was not going to pull back into that gas station. That just wasn't going to happen. So I just kept going straight, thinking there's got to be something that I can turn around and go back toward the highway again. Nothing. And we're driving forever. And it's nothing but just dense trees on both sides. Probably another 15, 20 minutes go by of us driving. And all of a sudden, I notice there's a building coming up and it's a gas station on my left. Except this time, it was no lights on, completely boarded up. There was ivy growing on it, and like half the roof was caved in. Like looked like it had been abandoned for years. It was completely dilapidated in disrepair. And I remember thinking, like, what the hell? Like, this is not right. But I remember at one point going, okay, this is a different gas station, has to be. But I saw the skid marks from our car when we skidded out of the gas station. So I was like, what the hell is going on? Of course, by this time, I am now freaking out. My brothers are yelling, go, go, go. Like, just go, don't stop. And so I just floored it straight again. I'm like, what am I going to do? Like, where we're going? And in 5 minutes, we're at the highway. We got back onto the highway and it was completely silent in the car. Like everybody was just, I guess, trying to wrap their brains around what had happened. But I remember just thinking like how terrified we were in that moment, and me especially, I guess it's big sister complex or mama bear complex or whatever. The fear of like, I was not going to be able to get my siblings to safety. And that was a very terrifying thought for me because I'm very protective of my family. The trip home was quiet. And I remember we got down to about an eighth of a tank of gas. I'm like, okay, I've got to stop for gas at this point. And so I remember looking for the brightest lit gas station that was right off of the exit, made sure there were signs. There was tons of people, tons of cars, because I did not want to take the chance of having to relive this all over again. And we got home. It was so incredibly late, so incredibly late. We ended up calling out of work on Monday because we were just all exhausted. And I had tried to bring it up to my brother T. I said, what happened last night? And he goes, I don't want to talk about it. And he has refused to talk about it to this day. The last time I tried to talk to him about it, he literally stormed out of my house, yelled at me, and stormed out of my house. I don't know if he heard something or saw something or experienced something that I didn't, but whatever it was that he went through completely traumatized him. My brother R, he has been more open about talking about it. And so I asked him and he's like, I don't know. Now my brother R is deaf, so keep that in mind. And, I asked him, what happened? He's like, it was a ghost. He always attributed to it being paranormal in that manner, that it was a ghost or a spirit or something like that. And we talk about it every once in a while. And, like, do you remember that? Yeah, I remember that. That was crazy. It was kind of scary kind of situation. But it's always kind of like popped into my head. Like, I remember the song that was playing when we were getting off the exit was Spice Girls, that one song, stop right there. Thank you very much. And I remember me and T were doing the whole like hand motions and, for that. And so anytime that song comes on, like the memory pops in my head. So it all came down to is I'd had this experience and I'd have, things would happen. I would think about it every time I would go back, come home from Florida. I don't know if it was subconsciously or just habit or what it was, but I would always drive and like try to find this exit. And I could never find the exit. And I would make that trip to Florida multiple times a year. Even the last time I went to Florida was in 2019. I still caught myself looking for this exit that I have yet to find. I had gone down there one time by myself and I was driving back home and it was during the day and I figured, oh, I don't have to be anywhere tomorrow. I can take my time getting home. And I remember going, okay, there's the sign. And I went down a couple exits. And I get off the exit and I drive 15 minutes, nothing. I'd get off, get back on the exit, go to the next. I did like three or four exits. I never found anything or nothing that looked familiar or resembled it. And so I just, even to this day, I still catch myself looking at it. At this point, I kind of feel like I'm willing to be open to any kind of theory or possibility, um, because there really is no explanation for what happened. I never thought of it as a glitch in the matrix, really. I always thought, okay, it was a ghost or something that we saw. And as this has kind of progressed, it turned into, whoa, this could be a lot more. But if you'd have asked me a month ago, about time travel or, glitches or timelines merging, I would have laughed at you and said, okay, this is nothing but science fiction, H.P. Lovecraft kind of stuff. I never would have thought that this would have happened.
Up next is Michelle's story. In 1986, she was returning home to Long Island after a trip to SUNY University in Cortland, upstate New York, with friends. While driving the highway lined with nothing but apple orchards, their car got a flat tire. They expected a long walk back to the last exit, but instead, they stumbled upon a town they don't remember passing. The town looks straight out of a Hallmark movie, and the residents are unusually kind. Only later do they realize just how strange and inexplicable this experience truly was. Hey, Michelle, tell me your ghost story.
So I came from a very spiritual family. We all went to Catholic school and we always had some belief in the paranormal. And growing up, I actually had an imaginary friend and her name was Jennifer. And what was so interesting about Jennifer was she was what I now know a hippie. I would see her and she would stand in my doorway at night when I was falling asleep and just tell me things. And I could describe what she was wearing. Now I was 10 years old at the time and she had bell-bottom jeans on. And I remember she had this belt with long leather tassels hanging from it. And she had a big floppy hat and she never scared me. It was a little off-putting, but I was never afraid of Jennifer. And I would tell my mother she was here and they would play along like it was some crazy imaginary friend. And then I later found out that there had been a big accident down the street in the 60s and a girl named Jennifer had passed in the accident. So I am pretty sure that Jennifer was a spirit that was just passing through. So little things like that have happened throughout my whole life. But the big one came when I was 13. I had a best friend. Her name was Dusty, and she was about 12, and she was a beacon. She was a little redheaded, spunky, ahead of her time, and we were thick as thieves. And one day we went to my mother's corporate picnic, and we spent the whole day together, and we had an amazing time. And when we got home, she wanted to go out, and I did not. I was tired. I didn't feel like going. So she had gone out with a couple of other girls. And unfortunately, crossing a street, she died. She was hit by a car and was killed. And it was very traumatic because not only did I lose somebody for the first time, but I felt guilt because if I would have gone with her, she would have not been in the place she was. So it was all my 13-year-old mind's fault. And I would speak to her and I would feel like she heard me. I don't know why. I can't explain why. I just always felt like she heard me. So I started to dream right around the time of her funeral that she was with me and she was telling me where she was and it was happy and it was warm and it was a loving place and she was fine. And I started to ask questions like what I should wear for the funeral, and she would give me answers, and clothes that I had in my closet, she would tell me in my dreams. And one day I mentioned to my other friend that I was dreaming about her, and she goes, so was I. And then the next day we would coordinate, and right around the same time we would dream about her. So the moving part was the last night I dreamt of her. She was sitting on my bed and she was stroking my hair, and she said, I'm going to go now. You're okay. You don't need me anymore. And I was 13 and I am 56 years old and I had never dreamt of her again. So I really got the feeling that she moved on, that she stayed with me as long as I needed her and she was always there watching me, but she had moved on. Now, because of this, I had already had very strict parents, but because of this episode, I was really not allowed to sleep over my friend's house. I couldn't go away by myself. My parents really locked me down. So when I was 16, 17, I had a friend who went away to college in SUNY Cortland. I was living in Long Island, and she said, my roommate's boyfriends are coming, and would you like to come and visit me? And I said, there's probably no way. But I said a few quick little prayers, and my strict Czechoslovakian father, who never said yes to anything, said okay to not only get in a car with strange boys that we didn't know, but go spend a weekend in a college. So that to me was the true miracle of this all. So I went to the college and we had an amazing weekend. And that Sunday we left a little later than we should have, and it was dark. And this was 1986, upstate New York, Cortland, and it was all apple orchards. There was nothing much up there. And he blows a tire on this dark road where there's no cars, there's no lights, there's nothing. And he did not have a spare. Now, I had not been many places. I had not done a lot, and I was petrified, so petrified that I prayed like I never prayed before. I mean, I reached deep down and felt this prayer. God, please help me. You have to help me. I'm with these strange boys. I'm in this dark place. And just then a car goes by and you see snakes and rodents crossing the thing. And I'm on this dark road and I'm already freaked out. And I'm like, that's it. Like, I'm going to die. Next thing you know, we're walking, and we had passed an exit probably 20 minutes in the car before. So there was no exit anywhere near where we were walking. We were walking for a couple of minutes, and all of a sudden I see this exit. We see this exit. And we look at each other like, do you remember that? Did you see that? And we're all like, no. There's two boys and me. And we're like, no. So we head up the exit. And I don't remember any signs or anything in particular. But as we walk up the entrance, you see this old town that I can only describe as a Hallmark movie. It was the little gas station with the two pumps that's attached to the gas station. There's some little shops and everything is closed except for this diner. Now, it's an old train car diner, silver, and it had this big pink sign that said diner, and it was all lit up. And we're like, this seems strange. Like, it doesn't fit. We're in this little town, and what is this? So we walk in, and the warmth and comfort and love, music playing in the background, a waitress in an old uniform with a little thing in her hair, and people just sitting there and music play. It was just the most warm, like you're home with your family with the fire going feeling. I just immediately felt we were going to be okay. So the waitress looks up and she goes, what's up, guys? And we said, we blew a tire on the highway, and, she's like, oh, that must be terrifying. And, we have to call AAA. Do you have a phone? And this man sitting next to us turns and goes, well, I happen to have a bunch of tires on my farm. I could probably help you. And I remember the boy saying, well, I have this different kind of car. It was like an Eldorado or something. It was an old car. You probably don't have it. And he goes, I'm sure I have something. Come on, come with me and we'll go get you taken care of. So he goes along with him. We had no fear. It's not like, should we go with him? It was just immediate ease. So I sit down and she puts in front of me this hot chocolate that was heaven sent. It really was. It was this big mug with whipped cream, and it was just the most spectacular hot chocolate. You know, people say when they're on drugs, they're chasing that high. I have been chasing that hot chocolate for years, and I drink it and we're all laughing and everybody's talking and everything is great. And I realized I need to call my father and let him know I'm going to be late. And I called him, and then I called my friend who was in SUNY Cortland, which only should have been about 20 minutes away, half hour maybe. And she mentions, what town? And I said, there's this little town. It's great. And I'm in this diner. And why didn't you ever tell me about this town? She goes, I really don't know what town you're talking about. And I said, well, you know, I'm here. And I didn't think twice. I was 16. So I get back to the counter and I went to pay for the hot chocolate. And she said, nope, it's on me. And at the same time, the guy came back with the farmer and said, you know, he found the exact tire we needed and it was brand new. He went and put it on for him and wouldn't take a dime. He wouldn't take anything. And the waitress hands us a brown paper bag, which had pie and a couple of apples in it and said, God bless, be safe. And we said, okay. And we left and we went on our way and everything was normal. Well, the next day I called my friend to let her know I made it home. And she goes, I have a map out. It's 1986. She goes, I have a map out and I have no idea what town you're talking about. And I said, you have to know it. There's a diner. And I explained the whole town. And she's like, so the next weekend she was coming home and she went by and there was nothing there. There was nothing there. Now, people have asked me, did you go back? No, I didn't really understand the gravity of it at that age. Life was moving fast at that age, and my friends stopped going to that college shortly after. So I really never did go back, and I don't remember the boys' names. I wish I did. So that's what happened there. It was such a miracle, and the feeling, there was nothing could go wrong. So my next story was my father passed away when I was 19. So Dusty passed away when I was 13, and my father passed away from cancer, unfortunately, at 46 years old when I was 19. And I had the opportunity to be in the audience, Montel Williams, when the psychic Sylvia Brown was going to be the guest. And I was probably 7 feet away from her. There was the row of the people on the show, and then we were directly right across from her. Now, if anybody remembers Sylvia Brown, she was loud and boisterous and, you know, the long nails and the big hair and the big, you know, New York bravado. When she walked out, she was the sweetest, quietest, kindest little woman. And she was kind and she was talking to people, but she was nothing. So I'm like, wow, that must be an act. You know, I didn't think twice. So she goes, give me a minute. I'm going to channel my spirit guide, Francine. I can't explain it, but I was watching her. Her eyes changed color. They went from like a hazel to a dark brown. And instantly that bravado that you see on Sylvia Brown came in. I mean, there was a shift you could feel it in her energy when her spirit guide took over. And I was chosen to ask a question. And, you know, I raised my hand and she chose me. And I said, my best friend and my father died when I was young. Are they with me? And do they have any messages for me? And she looked at me like she looked through me. She just fixated on me in a way that nobody has ever looked at me. And she goes, your father, he was tall and lanky. Now, I'm 5'3", little chubby, and there was no way that you could just look at me and know that my father was tall and lanky. And I just go, and I start crying because I couldn't believe she had said that. She goes, he's with you. He's with you when you're in the car, but he'll be with you in the car. And I said, okay. It was just like, okay. And I sat back down because I was just so overwhelmed. Well, a month later, I was living in Pennsylvania and I lived on top of a mountain. And as I was coming around a bend on the mountain to my home, a big pickup truck was spiraling out of control right at me. And I looked over to the left and there was off the side of the mountain, or to the right was boulders. Nowhere to go. So I just remember I was holding a cup of coffee, Brown Eyed Girl was on the radio, and I said, oh, bleep. And I opened my eyes and it's over. And I'm looking around and somebody comes running over. You could always tell how bad an accident is by how somebody looks at you. And he's just looking at me and he goes, are you okay? And I said, blood, do you see blood? And he's like, what? I go, do you see blood? Because I had the cup of coffee in my hand. It was warm. And he said, no, I'm a flight attendant. So I said, step back. I'm a flight attendant. And I kicked the door open. There was a pickup truck on top of my car. And I kicked that door open. And he's like, you know, you're on a mountain in Pennsylvania, right? Whatever. It's my training. And I look over and the car is crushed. The front of it, he had hit me and then flipped on top of me. So the whole front end of that car was demolished. I mean, there was no way. And the cops and the ambulance come pulling up and they're like, where's the driver of the Subaru? And I'm like, they're like, no, really, where's the driver of the Subaru? They could not understand how I, number one, got out on my own accord, and number two, had a scratch on my head from the Garmin that I hit. It was truly a miracle. You know, I consider myself a recovering Catholic because of the trauma that I went through in Catholic school. You know, they can be tough at times, but I have really been protected a lot of my life.
Thank you so much to Maria and Michele for sharing their stories. Go follow them on TikTok. Maria's handle is at weepingangel81 and Michelle's is at Connie C Airlines. Maria and Ashley at AshleyINC on TikTok have dug deep into investigations of Maria's mysterious gas station, so be sure to go follow them there for some pretty wild updates. Please show your support of the show by rating and reviewing the podcast wherever you listen. It really makes a difference. Find photos from the show at Tell Me Your Ghost Story Podcast on Instagram. Recently, I've been posting a series on TikTok of creepy, real paranormal photos. Find me there at Tell Me Your Ghost Story Pod. If you have a true paranormal story you'd like to share, please email it to tellmeyourghoststorypodcast@gmail.com. Until next time, my friends, good night to all, and to all a good night. Bye.